Hello and welcome to the Price of Football, the show that looks at the money behind the beautiful game and is currently desperately trying to find ways of seasonally adjusting a certain result. Yesterday, I'm Kevin Day, and down there in Sussex, trying desperately not to smirk behind his mask, is Liverpool University's Kieran Maguire. Kieran, how are you this morning?
I'm good, Kevin. I've got a ticket for Brighton versus Sheffield United, so I'm genuinely giddy. The prospect of seeing football. I thought I was going to be quite cynical about it, but I'm like a kid on Christmas Eve night now.
Yeah, I'm delighted for you. It's not only are you now 2 tiers below me, that I had to get up at 8:15 this morning on Sunday morning. I have to record this pod, just so you can go and watch Lincoln Brighton play. I'm a living saint, Kieran. You know that. And
you are indeed. And national treasure status awaits, Kevin.
This is after spending 2.5 hours being very polite on a Brighton podcast on Friday evening as well that you got me to do. Thank you very much. It's good. They love you down there in that Brighton podcast. My word.
They love you now as well.
They will do for the moment, at least until the next game. It made me laugh very much because they referred to Selhurst Park as Smellhurst Park, which I thought was very good work for 4 middle-aged men. Well done, boys. It's questions day, Kieran, but we do have a couple of news stories, one of which is very intriguing and slightly petty, and one of which is possibly one of my favourite stories of the season so far. The Premier League deal with the Middle East has collapsed. Is that the right word? Or no, renewed. That's it. I knew it was one or the other. I knew it had either gone really badly or really well. Renewed. That's it.
Yes, and there's a bit of a tale on this one because, the good news from the Premier League's point of view is that by all accounts, Bein have renewed the fee for the next 3 years. So, we had seen the Chinese fee collapse for the Premier League rights. So this covers the period 2022 to 25. So that gives the Premier League some certainty. It's decent money. And it covers the Middle East and North Africa. So it covers around about 40 countries. The vote took place on Thursday, and 19 clubs voted in favour, and 1 club voted against. Now, what club do you think might have a bit of a beef with Qatar, or Qatar even? And
Qatar's great. I don't mind Qatar. Yes. I was still wondering whether you pronounced Bein correctly because it's a very short word, but you seem to get corrected every time you mention whatever way you pronounce it. Someone says it's not that, but Qatar, that's Bein's long gone. I should. That's cheering me even at 8:45 on a Sunday morning. That's made me laugh. Kid. Well done. No one's ever done that before. That's brilliant. So, to answer your question, I'm going to guess it would have to be Newcastle. I guess, is it?
That's right, Mystic Kevin, as you will now be known on the podcast. Newcastle voted against, and clearly this is linked to the ongoing issues with regard to the takeover at St James's Park. The deal, I understand, is not dead, and clearly I think what Newcastle wanted to do is that they knew that they were not going to be successful in defeating the proposal, but that they still want to show the Saudi authorities that they are keen. It does look as if things on a diplomatic level might be improving slightly in the Middle East. We still have a position where Bein, I've forgotten now, they are officially banned in Saudi Arabia, which is one of the biggest Middle East markets. So the Premier League have tried to make progress on that, but have failed to do so, mainly due to the fact that our friends with silver tongues, whenever the Premier League phone up and say anything you can do about this alleged piracy issue being sponsored by the Saudi authorities, they immediately put the phone down on the Premier League, so they're not unable to pursue things any further.
So you think it's a fairly simple conclusion to draw, Kieran, that Newcastle have done this? They abstained or voted against for geopolitical reasons rather than for any concern about the financial implications of the deal then?
Yeah, it's a good deal. At a time when we're seeing deals around the world collapse in other countries and in other markets, yes, this is very much tied into the changing of the guards, or the prospective changing of the guards at Newcastle itself. So that the Mike Ashley and I think we'd probably do the same if it was our club. If you're wanting to move the club on, you've got a prospective new partner, new owner. Why upset them by voting for something which is going to be against their wishes?
Yeah, and now to a lovely story, Kieran, but one I suspect that the princes in Saudi Arabia would disapprove of.
Yes, Stevenage. Stevenage is women's team. I think the men's team are sponsored by Burger King, and the women's team are getting special logos which says Burger Queen on them, which is nice. Although my recollection of gay parties from the early 80s in Brighton, Burger Queen has a completely different meaning. So I hope people don't go around Googling this particular phrase, because their eyebrows might fall off their heads as a result of that.
It astonishes me, Kieran. It was a lovely story, and then suddenly, well, for those who are fans of the Burger Queen, it still is a lovely story. There's probably quite a few people now wistfully thinking back to the good old days. And let's draw their attention back to 2020 and questions on Price of Football. Stop thinking about gay clubs in Brighton in the early 80s. How do you do it, Kieran? No, don't answer. I'm not answering that. That's not a question I'm asking.
No,
I know.
I won't tell you how to do the Burger Queen.
I don't have to do that. I don't have to Google it. I didn't. I meant, how do you manage to turn every story into a nostalgic burger fest? This is not. It doesn't go out on Sunday morning. That's fine. It goes out on Mondays. It's all good. Sorry, God. Jason Higgins has a question that combines two of our favourite themes recently. When Ben Godfrey signed for Everton from Norwich, says Jason, the fee was undisclosed, but it was rumoured to be around £20 to £25 million. Does this mean that fans of York City, his first club, are never likely to find out the true amount they will receive as a sell-on fee? As McGill, the owner, has never been transparent with York fans as what the actual sell-on fee was. It's rumoured to be 10%. So there's a lot of rumoured and a lot of arounds in that. But it, as I say, it combines undisclosed fees and sell-on fees, which we've been talking about a lot recently. And this is a new question that hasn't been asked before, which is tautology, obviously.
Yes, I think this will be tricky. I mean, I don't know whether the York City supporters group, whether they own some of the shares. I did some background into York City Football Club. Now the owner, Jason McGill, he owns 75% of the club, which means that it could be that there are other shareholders who will get a full set of the accounts, because York City only publishes at Companies House what we refer to as abbreviated accounts. As you know, I'm completely against those in terms of football clubs because of their important status within communities. But that's where we are. So all that we know is that York City historically have lost quite a lot of money. This guy, Jason McGill, the good news is that he has funded the club. The club owe him around about £8 million. So that might seem fairly generous. I then went into the back pages, which, as you know, I love a delve. And it turns out that in the last year, he charged them 640 grand in interest. Now, for a club which is non-league, that's going to be one of their biggest costs. And the loan, part of the loan, he was charging interest at 11%, which I think is pretty obscene. So he's not as benevolent as he might make himself out to be. In terms of this sell-on fee, if somebody does manage to get hold of a full set of accounts, then we should be able to work out, sort of do a bit of extrapolation, triangulation from some of the numbers to get a broad indication of the fee involved, because it would have to be either embedded into a bigger number and we can subtract it out, or it might actually be disclosed on the income statement itself.
You see, this is still something a year into this pod, Kieran, even longer than that now. I don't quite firmly get a grip on this idea that he lends the club £6 million, as you say, and he takes £650,000. Isn't he? He's just circulating his own money, isn't he?
Well, it's more than that, because in theory, if he does sell the club, he will get his loans repaid from a prospective new owner, and on top of that, he'll have made the interest money as well. So it's like any loan from a lender. How do they make money? They get their capital repaid in due course. And they make interest on top of that, and the higher the risk, the higher the rate of interest. But 11%. I know it's not on the whole loan, but 11% these days is pretty stiff, especially when you look at the likes of Spurs and the Football Association borrowing at 0.5% from the Bank of England.
Okay, Neil Thomas. I quite like the cut of Neil's jib. I think there's a certain element of cynicism in Neil's jib that I probably would quite admire. Neil says that over the past year, I've read a lot of transfer reports that use phrases like personal terms agreed, all that remains is for the club to settle on a fee before a deal is done. Thiago, for example. Didn't this used to be considered tapping up? The cynic in me knows it's always happened, but I'm sure that publishing such a suggestion used to be a serious allegation. Did I miss a rule change, or have the authorities just stopped caring?
No, it is still illegal as far as the rules are concerned, because the player's registration is held by the existing club. And it's not that long ago that Liverpool were accused by Southampton of trying to tap up Virgil van Dijk. And Southampton said, we're going to take this further. And as a result of that, Liverpool backed out of any further communication, and the deal then went through 6 to 12 months later. So the formal position is that tapping up is still illegal. If we talk to our, we've got to know a few people at clubs in different roles, and we've also spoken to agents. The first thing to establish is the player interested in a move? So, that tends to go through an informal route. It could be agent to agent. It could be even a player is a player at the prospective buying club who might know the other player from playing in the same international team or things of this nature. Football is a very small industry, and WhatsApp is our friend because WhatsApp is encrypted. So it's actually very difficult to get hold of proof of tapping up. But the official position is that it is illegal. A club owns a player's registration until they decide to sell it on. And if anybody interferes with that process, then potentially they are subject to sanctions from the football authorities.
Neil has a fair point, though, because, you read virtually every day in the tabloids phrases like this that imply that personal terms are agreed, the deal is done, the clubs have to settle on a fee, and quite often weeks, months before a deal is done, and then that deal is done. So obviously, like you say, football is a small world and it's a gossipy one, but clearly the newspapers have no compunction about, well, I was going to say publishing half-truths, but we know that to be the case. But it does seem like it's a rule that's kind of obeyed more in the Beach and the Observers, doesn't it?
Yes, I agree with you entirely. I mean, if you take a look at every story in the newspapers, you kiss a lot of frogs before you actually make a signing. In terms of the constant rumours of interest, just because a club sends a scout to watch a match, which they're doing all the time, and that's what they should be doing, because they are looking for player recruitment, doesn't mean that they've gone as far as establishing contact between either at boardroom to boardroom level or with the player himself. So I think we have to take what we see in the newspapers with a large degree of salt, because the newspapers know that transfer rumours sell, and they're desperate to sell copy at present, as always, which is fully understandable. I think a classic case is the Jadon Sancho deal. Willie, won't he have personal terms been agreed? Well, informally they will have been. Somebody will have found out how much he's on. Manchester United will have put this is what we're prepared to pay. Not that we're looking to sign a player, but a player of Jadon Sancho's stature would be expected to be on such and such, and that word gets around. All of the numbers we see quoted in the press are one thing, if you and we had this discussion the other day. We know that agents gossip to each other and they're inclined to embellish, but there tends to be a bit more of a grain of truth in some of the stuff that they come out with.
I'm leaving a small pause here, Kieran, in case you do have a story about kissing South American frogs at a party some stage in the other, but clearly not. So let's move on. Jamie Moss has asked a simple question, but it's an interesting one. Jamie Moss's question is, Premier League clubs shelled out £1.2 billion on transfer fees in the summer transfer window. How long could you keep EFL clubs going for with that much money?
Well, I mean, the simple answer is, according to my figures, clubs in the EFL generated £248 million in matchday ticket sales. So that would give us around about 4.8 years. However, we talk about the Premier League spending £1.2 billion, but where is that money actually gone? Well, Ollie Watkins was at Brentford, Nathan Ake was at Bournemouth, Godfrey Norwich, Eze, who you signed, who looks a cracking player, he's come from Brentford, Callum Wilson, again, Bournemouth. So the Premier League has probably already spent, the thick end of 150 to 200 million pounds in money going to the EFL. On top of that, of course, you've got parachute payments, and then we've got these things called solidarity payments. So there is a lot of money flowing from the Premier League already to the EFL, except the 1.2 billion pounds. It's a nice headline figure, and it's easy to beat the Premier League around the head with it. But if you think about it, if somebody spent 1.2 billion pounds, somebody's got to have received 1.2 billion pounds as well, and the EFL are amongst the recipients.
Okay. Our next question comes from Mylia Moses. My apologies, Mylia, if I pronounced that incorrectly. And if I did, I just did it twice. So I apologise again. But Mylia, third time, Moses, has a follow-up question to last week's discussion about Swansea. And the question is, can you explain the situation regarding the change in directors at the club? Do these changes have anything to do with the convertible loan received from Jake Silverstein, who was appointed as a director a few months ago?
Trying to get to the bottom of this is tricky, and I think probably the best people to speak to here would be Swansea City Supporters Trust, though I think they've been knocked back on a few occasions. For those people not familiar with the story, Swansea City were effectively controlled by two Americans, one of whom was called Stephen Kaplan. In fact, he still is called Stephen Kaplan, I suspect. And he had control of the club. Now, control means that you have more than 50% of the shares, so from a legal position. And then in August, a document was lodged at Companies House from a company controlled by an American guy called Jake Silverstein. And this loan, which took place in August, had what we refer to as convertible loan status, which means that at the point in time, those loans could either be repaid or alternatively, they could be converted into shares. Now, in October, more documents came out which said that Stephen Kaplan had now lost control, and I think this is what Myla was sort of suggesting. Does that mean that at that point in time, Jake Silverstein converted his loan into shares, and as a result of that, the shareholding of Steve Kaplan fell below 50%. Now, at the same time in October, Steve Kaplan ceased to be a director of Swansea. So does this mean that he's lost interest in the club? Jake Silverstein, is he now taking more of a day-to-day involvement? It's very difficult to get to the bottom of this because Steve Kaplan's investment comes from an American company registered in the state of Delaware. Now, if anybody is familiar with Delaware, it's the American equivalent of the British Virgin Islands or somewhere of that nature, i.e. very, very relaxed corporate governance rules, and trying to work out who owns what and who is the power behind the throne is very difficult. So unfortunately, we're probably none the wiser. I mean, it might be an idea if we try to get Swansea City Supporters Trust to come on the show, and they might be able to give us a bit more transparency. And also, I like them because they do an absolutely fantastic job down there. As a fan-owned club, but I know that they felt uncomfortable about what was happening over the course of the summer. They were big fans of Trevor Birch, who was the former chief exec there, but he then, of course, left in early September to go to Spurs, and he's now left Spurs to go to be the chief executive of the EFL. So I think they've potentially lost somebody who was willing to listen to their comments and was willing to stand up for them. So yeah, it's concerning, the position in Swansea. And as always, we've said if clubs are transparent, you can stop an awful lot of people worrying. And the people don't understand why we as football clubs worry about our football clubs. It's because it is so central to our lives. And people that don't get football don't get our love and affection. But Swansea have had problems in terms of administration issues and things of that historically. So you can understand the fans' perspective in being wary about any change of ownership, especially where the new owners are not being upfront all the time.
Yeah, I think we should probably take this opportunity to show a bit of affection to Trevor Birch as well. As a couple of weeks ago, we were quite scathing about the recruitment process that saw Trevor Birch get his new post. And perhaps we should have separated that from the man himself, because we had several people who got in touch with us to say that Trevor is a very, very good person, a very good administrator. So sorry about that, Trevor, if you're listening. And if you are, thank you very much. Don't forget to subscribe. Hopefully you're manscaping like the rest of us. And if Guy's listening as well, yes, let's see if we can get somebody from the Swansea City Supporters Trust.
Does Guy listen to the show?
I don't know. I don't think he listens to the Monday ones for some. He seems to do about 12 school runs a day, which keep him busy. I don't know what else he does, but it's nearly always, whatever time we try and get hold of him, he's on some sort of school run or running from a school. I don't know. As we've established,
that's different, Guy.
It's very different. Oh, that is different. Yeah, we've established that the only thing we can establish about Guy is that he is a man of mystery. That's the. No stories from him about anywhere in the world that he's been to. Never mind. I doubt if this bit will even go out. Okay. Oh, no, he doesn't listen, so of course he will. Sarah Warren has, I think, a very interesting question. And it's one of those questions that you kind of think, I should have asked that. And I've been saying that a lot recently, which implies that I should be doing a lot more research than I do. Sarah Warren says, I'm interested to learn more about how club sponsors work, specifically around Stoke City being sponsored by Bet365, which is also owned by the Coates family who own the club. Is it more financially beneficial for club owners to be sponsored by their own company? And if so, why don't more owners do it? Or is it a case of higher exposure marketing perspective that they want to tap into using the club?
Well, in answer to Sarah's question, it can be more beneficial if the owner is able to provide financial support from a financial fair play point of view. So if we take a look at the position at Stoke, I went again into the small print of Stoke's accounts, and they said that they had £4 million worth of sales in 2019 when the club was in the Championship from a companies under common ownership, i.e. Bet365 related companies. Now, would you normally expect to get £4 million worth of sales and sponsorship if you're a Championship club? Well, my gut feeling, and again, having done a bit of research, is that a front of shirt sponsorship deal in the Championship, if you're getting £500,000, it's actually quite a decent sum of money. So if Stoke are getting 4 million, and that will include, of course, the stadium sponsorship and the shirt sponsorship and other bits and pieces as well, then that's a good way of getting extra money into the club that counts towards financial fair play. And we have seen some issues. Of course, if we go back to the infamous Manchester City case against UEFA, where Manchester City were being sponsored by Etihad. The Etihad deal was initially worth £350 million over 10 years, and that was signed, was it 2009, 2010? So that at the time seemed quite high. So it is a way of getting additional money into the club, which potentially can count towards financial fair play. In theory, this has got to be what the accountants refer to as fair value, but the trouble is, nobody knows what fair value is. It's it's a bit like how do you value a Picasso? How do you value a castle? How do you value a front of shirt sponsorship deal if you are Manchester City? Because you can say, well, Manchester United are earning more, but they're Manchester United. They've got a bigger fan base, but should they be getting more than Everton? It's actually trying to come up with a definitive figure which is deemed to be fair. But we have seen Leicester. Leicester have been sponsored by King Power quite often, and clearly it's the King Power Stadium, and that's their owners. Even Scunthorpe are sponsored by the Sands Venue, which is a nightclub in Blackpool.
Oh.
Which
that's got our attention. Yeah.
I suspect it's not the same as Frenchies, though, for a variety of reasons. Because it's not in administration, and B, I can't think of anything more depressing than Frenchies in the late 80s. It was a really grim experience.
Yeah, and C, it hasn't been burned down for the insurance money.
That's correct. Yes.
Yeah. Sorry, I thought the cliche about value and defining value is always it's something is worth what somebody else is willing to pay for it.
It's what somebody is willing to pay with it at arm's length. Now, can you see that
we're back to Frenchies again, aren't we?
Yes, very much.
You've very much got a discount for arm's length, I understand.
And it's a bit like if I remember when my kids were small and they do a drawing. They come to me and say, "How much is that worth, Dan?" So I'll give you £1 for it. Probably wasn't worth £1 if truth be told, Kevin. But that wasn't an arm's length transaction. So if the two parties are connected, it was quite enterprising, my son.
I'm sorry. I just love the fact that an accountant's children. That's how they communicate with Daddy. How much is this worth, Daddy? Oh. Well, seasonally adjusted, son. That's hilarious.
The following day, there'd be 30 drawings he'd done. It was worth £1 yesterday, Dad. It's got to be worth 30. I go, what?
Yeah, he's putting the price down. Then he's a fool to himself because he needs to be creating scarcity, not putting more on the market. He's flooded the market there, isn't he?
Yeah. He's not going to be Banksy, that's for sure. So that's where we are. The benefits are that the deals tend to be at the upper end of the price spectrum. And if you get it just right, it means that you probably won't get a charge from the Premier League or the EFL. It's a bit like Derby County selling their ground for £80 million. Sorry, bingo. I don't know who else. If Pride Park was worth £81 million because that was the best offer they got, I'm intrigued as to what the second best offer would have been. I'll say no more than that. So that's where we are. Trying to get. You're absolutely right. It's what somebody's prepared to pay. But when you're effectively selling to yourself, things become more complex.
I think somewhere, like New Zealand or Malaysia, when we get to the final of the New Zealand or Malaysia, Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? And the final question to win $1 million in New Zealand or Malaysia is, how much is Pride Park worth? And one lucky person who happens to be a listener, and people will be going, he knew it was worth 81 million quid. It's like, yes, because he heard it every single week on Price of Football. No matter how much we have the pep talk before recording, said, no, not this week. Our next question comes from somebody whose surname I always love to pronounce because it was my mother's maiden name, God rest her soul, Ian McLaughlin. And Ian McLaughlin's question is, how can clubs create retro versions of kits to sell again using the shirt sponsors of the time? So, for example, you can get the Palace shirt with Virgin written on it. but you can't not necessarily using the kit manufacturer of the time, which I think is a really good question. Ian says, I understand that Nike or Adidas wouldn't be happy with someone else producing a product with their brand on, so how can sponsors be?
Well, I think from the sponsor's perspective, all publicity is good publicity. And also remember, they are not having to pay for the privilege of having their name on that shirt. Whereas under normal circumstances, that would be the case. So what would normally happen is the club would contact the sponsor. That's if they still exist.
Right.
Because I remember when Brighton, we were sponsored by Nobbo.
Oh, I remember that. Don't you worry.
I'm sure all Palace fans remember that, and because Palace fans used to say there's a couple of F's missing at the end of that one. Yeah. We still now produce those as retro shirts and British Caledonian. So many companies are no longer in existence. So therefore, there is no intellectual property issues. If the company is still in existence, what would normally happen would be that the club would contact the company and say, informally, this is what we're planning to do. We're not going to ask you for any money, but you are getting effectively free publicity from this. Do you have any objection? Now, it could be that some companies might object, but there's no logical reason for them to do so on the grounds that all marketing, especially free marketing, is good marketing. So there are benefits in taking that approach for all parties involved. The clubs make more money. As far as the manufacturers are concerned, the manufacturers sign a deal with a football club which gives them the rights to be the kit manufacturer for a fixed period of time. So therefore, if Adidas, when they formerly made Palace's kit, they wouldn't be able to sell it now because that would be a conflict. They no longer have the rights to do so. So that's why the sponsors are okay with it, but the manufacturers aren't.
Well, you say the sponsors are okay with it, but how would American Express feel, for example, if they're wandering around a club shop at Brighton and half the shirts that are being sold in there have Nobbo or British Caledonian written on the front, the retro shirts?
I don't think that they see it as a market that's cannibalising itself, because if you take a look at shirt sales, fans like to have this year's kit, and then on top of that, they might get as a Christmas present a kit from yesteryear, because that's the way the fan is. That they remember that particular season because of a good cup run, or their favourite player wore that shirt, or so on. So normally it's done with sponsors from 20 or 30 years ago, and they're not seen as competing for the same pound. It's an addition, it's a complement to buying this year's shirt, rather than a substitute.
Yeah, of course. The problem with your shirts is not the logo, is it? It's not the sponsors. It's that bedraggled little bird that ruins the corner of it, whatever colour it is. This episode of The Price of Football is brought to you by Manscaped, providers of the best in men's below-the-waist grooming. Now, Kieran, as regular listeners will know, this sort of thing isn't my bag, but it is yours, and I've just realised that isn't my bag possibly wasn't the most appropriate introduction I could have given you.
Well, Kevin, I like Smooth Operator by Sade. I like smooth talking when I'm with the Baroness. And to add to that list, I'm now talking smooth down below the waist, thanks to the Manscaped Lawnmower 3.0 electric trimmer. I was a little bit nervous before using it. I'll be the first to admit that, but it's got a ceramic blade to reduce grooming accidents. It keeps things safe. You don't get unexpected nicks down there, and it's a premium product. The battery will last up to 90 minutes, so you can take your time down below. Which is a piece of advice I was given when I was 16. Now, that's the deal, Kevin, but we've also got a benefit for listeners to The Price of Football.
We do, and I feel obliged to say that it not only prevents nicks, it prevents snags and tugs as well. So neither of those things are what you want. But if you want to get your sack in shape for Christmas, get 20% off and free shipping with the code PriceOfFootball at manscaped.com. That's 20% off with free shipping at manscaped.com with the code PriceOfFootball. And don't forget to linger down below. Kieran, I know you're a very big fan of the whole manscaping thing, but surely this weather you need a little bit of growth down there. Don't you feel the chill after lawn mowing your privates?
No, because they also supply us, of course, with the testicle deodorant, and that's so much easier to put on to a smooth set of nads.
And it keeps you warm as well, does it?
That's right. Yeah, it's a bit like deep heat.
Kieran, if you're... No, never mind. I was about to say don't put it next to the deep heat on the bathroom shelf, but there you are. Andrew Hebditch, save us from this Tory discussion with a question. He has done. Andrew Hebditch has his question. And Andrew says, my question relates to FFP. Oh dear. Clubs can gamble, and if they get promoted, they can avoid any penalties for overstepping the limits. Why then does the EPL and the EFL dovetail the penalties? From the EPL perspective, the current clubs would be trying to stop strong clubs being promoted. From the EFL perspective, if clubs know they can't escape a penalty if they're promoted, there'll be less inclination to gamble big. Points penalties would be better, as that can almost certainly guarantee an immediate return. So what stops the EFL and the EPL agreeing this?
Well, there is now an agreement between the two institutions in terms of fines. So if a club abuses financial fair play, exceeds the limits, and the EFL imposes a fine, the Premier League now said that must be paid. However, the Premier League is not willing to impose points deductions decided by an EFL commission because they feel that would have a negative impact upon the competitive nature of the Premier League. So if a club got promoted and then started on minus 12 points, then they're effectively relegated before the start of the season. It's tough enough to stay up as it is. So that's the agreement that is presently in place. Now, in order to try to prevent clubs just spending as if money didn't exist, gambling on getting promoted and therefore waving bye-bye to the EFL and paying the fine the next year, my understanding is that the clubs in the Championship now have to submit budgets on a regular basis to the EFL. And in theory, those budgets will be monitored by the EFL, which could impose points deductions during the season. Now, I think that's going to be quite a challenging operation. We've seen in respect of what's happened with Sheffield Wednesday that their issues took place in 2018. The points deduction was eventually imposed for 2020-21, and then partway through 2021, it was then reduced. So I would imagine that if the EFL did try to impose a points deduction, and realistically they wouldn't be getting the budgets until the second half of the year, our silver-tongued friends would be using delaying tactics to ensure that no decision was made before the end of the season. Their client therefore gets up to the Premier League, and any subsequent points deductions could only therefore apply when they were relegated, or if they were relegated back to the EFL. So it's a murky one, and it's very challenging for the football authorities themselves, who want to prevent clubs from overspending, but enforcing it is the big challenge.
Caleb Coolman asked a question about something we have discussed before, but I'm very happy to ask it again, just so I can finally get a handle on what seems to be a simple issue, but is deceptively confusing for idiots like me. So Caleb Coleman's question: in the EFL this season, you can purchase the live stream to one game for £10. How does that get split up? What percentage goes to the league and to the home and away team?
Right. Well, first of all, I'd like to apologise to the EFL club owner that I phoned at 7 o'clock this morning to just confirm the numbers.
What were you thinking?
Well, I've been up since 5 researching, so I thought, oh fuck.
You're a one-off, Kieran. The rest of us don't march to the same beat of the drum as you do, Kieran. I can't imagine any EFL club owner who just literally went to bed last night thinking, "Oh my God, we're in Tier 4. What do we do? Oh, the phone's going, darling. I hope it's nothing serious. It could be your mother. I don't know whose number this is. I imagine it's a blocked number now. Hello, it's Kieran here. What? Well, I've been up since 5. I don't see why you shouldn't be up since 5. Caleb Coleman's got a question about the.
Yeah, it was a brief discussion. I have to be said.
You're perfect for Christmas, Kieran, because you are the gift that keeps on giving. Carry on.
So, well, the position is that normally you'd have 20% going on VAT. The EFL used to keep 20%, but my understanding is that because they want as much money to go to clubs as possible, that's effectively been waived. So in terms of the money, any iFollow, whatever you call them, patches, any of the iFollow purchases made by fans of the home club or sold by the home club, that money goes to the home club itself, excluding VAT.
Right.
When it comes to the away fans, what they try to do is to say, well, how many away fans would we expect to attend the match? So if it was, Cambridge going to Accrington, if they'd expect, say, 400 fans to attend, then the first 400 sold by Cambridge as the away team, they would go back to the home team, because normally, of course, the home team keeps all the gate receipts, and then the excess is kept by the away club. So trying to work out these figures accurately, I think is quite a challenge, but that's down to the two clubs involved, and if they can't agree, then I think the EFL would probably act as arbiter on that. So it's not great. You knock out 20% VAT and you're down to just over £8. You've got to sell an awful lot of passes at £8 a pop to make money.
Yeah, I'll ask you to explain VAT one day, because again, it always seems to me like the club owner lending his club money just seems to be a circular way of passing your own money around. But when you say that they would calculate the number of away fans at each game, as using that Accrington Cambridge as an example, if it was a midweek game, presumably they would calculate far fewer Cambridge fans than they would if it was a Saturday game.
Yes. I think there are. One of the things we have noted in recent years is that attendances at EFL matches for midweek games is noticeably lower than for Saturdays. Now, that could be on the fact that there's people at work. Clearly, the away fans, it's more of a struggle. You've got kids at school and their parents might not want them to go. But also, it's because it clashes with Champions League matches, and that has been an issue. And again, going on to discussions we've had previously with regards to an expanded form of senior European competition, this has implications for clubs in the EFL, because there's going to be more midweek matches taking place, which means more Tuesdays where you're going to end up with lower crowds.
It's interesting that, Kieran. I think we probably have mentioned this before, but it kind of vindicates the Football League back in the 60s and 70s, really, who refused to even allow the BBC or ITV to announce what highlights were being shown that evening until 5 o'clock, in case it impacted on the crowds at those games, and always refused to allow games to be live when Division 3 and Division 4 games were going on. And they probably had a bit more foresight than we gave them credit for at the time, if it does have that impact on attendances in League 1, League 2, isn't it?
Yes. I mean, it's certainly going to hit those clubs. I mean, the Premier League will argue that they do give solidarity payments to clubs in League 1 and League 2, and that helps to make up for the fact that there will be clashes. And clearly, we can't establish the impact of matches taking place at 3 p.m, which are now being broadcast live by BT or Sky or Amazon. Does that impact upon the number of iFollow passes that are being sold? Because effectively, you're getting the match for free from the Premier League if you've got an existing signage, existing subscription to one of the main broadcasters. But it's certainly not going to increase the number of passes that are being sold by the EFL clubs.
Now, Mark Ridley has asked our next question. I've never met Mark, but I'm guessing that Mark is a no-nonsense kind of guy. As you know, Kieran, I sometimes like to amuse myself when I'm writing the questions down that guys sent through by picturing the people who've written the questions in my head, and this is such a no-nonsense question. I can only picture Mark as being from North Yorkshire, basically. Probably some kind of hill farmer, doesn't want to waste words, gets straight to the nub. And basically, Mark Ridley says, how much do football clubs pay in a year for their utilities like electricity and water? That wasn't a North Yorkshire accent, by the way. I just thought I'd do it. I thought I'd do it in a voice to distinguish from my own voice.
But slightly rough.
But it's my favourite. I think it's probably my favourite question of the season. How much do football clubs pay for their electricity then? Eh?
Well, we've always said, myself and Kevin, that size doesn't matter. But when it comes,
you say that, Kevin. We're probably the only two people in the world who say that. By the way.
But when it comes to utility bills, it does. So it will depend upon the facilities. The clubs don't break these down in their financial statements. I have been through a few clubs that are more detailed than others, but even so, they sort of say sort of general, stadium overheads and things of this nature. So I can't give a definitive figure, but it will, of course, be impacted upon the size of the stadium, but also the nature of the relationship between the club and the stadium. Is it owned or is it rented? It could be if it's rented. Does it include utility costs and things of this nature? So, unfortunately, Mark, I can't give you a definitive answer because there isn't one. The clubs don't disclose that information, and it will vary considerably from club to club. I do have the detailed figures from one club, but out of professional courtesy, I don't think it would be appropriate for me to reveal them.
Is it Brighton?
No.
Okay. Should we go through the whole lot, see if I can make you cry? Is it Mansfield?
It's not Derby.
Oh, thank God for that. So the West Ham deal, for example, so it's possible that that deal could be that the West Ham don't pay for the gas and electricity and water, then that the company they rent the stadium from.
There's an awful lot of things that West Ham don't pay for in that deal. They don't pay for the corner flags, for example.
Yeah.
And
okay.
It's a very well negotiated deal on behalf of West Ham, and I'm sure that yourself, as a person who is living in London, is absolutely delighted on their behalf.
Yeah, let's not go down there because it inevitably leads to tweets. Matt Ford. Unfortunately, I don't think it's the Matt Ford who's my dear friend who does the voices for Spitting Image. Boris Johnson is uncanny. Is Donald Trump is uncanny. It's Keir Starmer. Could be anyone, frankly. It's really just simply
a bit like Keir Starmer himself.
Very much so. Maybe that's what Matt's working for. Maybe he's working on meta levels when it comes to. He's not. I know Matt so well. It's not that Matt Ford because this Matt Ford doesn't have an E at the end. Now, Matt Ford's question: Arsenal were rightly pilloried for making 55 backroom staff redundant to save less than £2 million on the wage bill, while spending millions on player bonuses and new signings just during COVID, obviously. However, are they the only club to have behaved like this, or should others be getting equal criticism?
I think Arsenal certainly didn't help themselves by the timing of their announcement, which was immediately after winning the FA Cup. And Arsenal fans will remember that because that was probably the last time they did celebrate winning a match. This was actually linked to changes in the way that they were running their scouting department. So that was one of the drivers of change. Now, my understanding from putting ear to the ground is that there have been redundancies made at other clubs as well. But those redundancies have tended to be in 2s and 3s rather than making 50 people redundant in a single go, which certainly did not improve Arsenal's status, given that their owner, Stan Kroenke, is a very wealthy individual. And it's similar with furlough. I think some clubs have been using the furlough scheme sort of on the quiet, which is fine. I mean, and certainly those clubs in the EFL which are using it, I fully understand the reasons for doing so, and they're perfectly valid reasons because they are denied income and they don't have the benefits of a big TV deal. All I would say, Matt, it's more common than we thought. Can't name names. But the way that Arsenal went about it was, we have this saying here on the show, the tin ear, and it was a classic way of how not to deal with something of a sensitive nature.
You know, one of the things I love about football, Kieran, and of course you, is that only a football fan would insult another football club by saying you haven't won anything since you won the FA Cup 5 months ago. That's what a loser of a club you are. You've done nothing since you won the last FA Cup final just a few months ago. Our penultimate question comes from Ben Passberger. Ben's question is, are there many examples of clubs having to reduce accounts receivables and increase expenses by large amounts based on irrecoverable or doubtful debts owed to them, be it because of other clubs going bankrupt or bad owners delaying repayments? Now, I have to be honest here, Kieran and Ben. Normally, when I ask a question, I have at least some grasp on what I'm actually asking. But this one, I had to read several times before I got a sense of what Ben was actually asking. But obviously, you know straight away because you're the expert.
Well, what we're talking about here is player transfers on credit. So that is the common way these days. So if you sell a player for 20 million quid, it could be a £5 million down payment, and then you've got 3 further instalments. So what Ben is referring to is, are there examples of situations where a club has sold a player and the buying club has not paid? Now, that has been the case, my understanding, in Europe, and UEFA have imposed sanctions on those clubs that have failed to pay outstanding instalments on due times. My big fear is that we could be entering a period where this comes into the domestic game. It hasn't as yet. But if players have been sold to clubs in France, given the collapse of the French TV deal, that's my concern. And if that is the case, then we could see a domino effect. We could see situation in the world of football to what happened in 2007 with the global economic crash, which was all based on the very, very quick sale of toxic debt from one party to another. And eventually the music stopped and somebody didn't pay, and then the whole system collapsed. There are checks and balances. We do have the football creditors rule and things of that nature. But we have seen in the case of some clubs that have gone into administration that not all of the football debts were paid on time, and these therefore dragged out for a period of time until the administrators managed to gather together the money, or the new owners effectively had to then underwrite the outstanding payments in terms of football debts. So we're in a very precarious position at present, but fingers crossed, nothing major has happened in the domestic game as yet. So if that did happen, potentially you'd have to write off money due from another club in respect of an outstanding transfer.
Yeah, we'll be talking about that French TV deal collapse in a little bit more detail on our pod on Thursday, because somewhat to my surprise, we are releasing a pod on Christmas Eve. It will be a slightly shorter one than usual, Kieran, because I think Guy didn't misread the tone in my voice this time, and I went, "What? Really? Why? It's Christmas Eve."
You'll be able to talk through your tips for roast potatoes, though.
I will do, yes. I like to think of myself as a roast potato king. On other pods, Kieran, it would have been tips for the King George on Boxing Day at Kempton, but no. No, I like the fact now that all the 40,000 people listening to this will be going, well, Christmas Eve, I wasn't going to bother, but now, if Kevin's doing his roast potato tips, that would be lovely. I was just going to diss a famous cook, TV chef whose roast potato recipe I think is terrible. But yeah,
Mary, is that for after the show? Is that
Mary
Showbiz Revelation?
Mary Berry's roast potato. Who puts semolina on their roast potatoes? What? Serious? Don't start me on Mary Berry. Roast potatoes.
Marmite and roast potatoes. That's the way forwards.
Marmite.
Oh yeah.
Marmite. Peanut butter. Well, don't start me on that.
That's disgusting.
No,
but Marmite roast potatoes. Well, it's the stuff of the gods.
How can you say that Marmite is disgusting in peanut butter, but not roast potatoes? Don't listen to him, kids. I've given that instruction before many times when Uncle Kieran starts telling his stories. But on the roast potatoes and Marmite, no. This is going to get mentioned in tweet reviews, isn't it? Now, our final question comes from somebody who I suspect may be joining you at the Amex today, Kieran, when, please God, Sheffield United get their first win of the season. Your Brighton friends told me in some detail the other night that it was almost inevitable that Sheffield United would get their first win of the season. And they told me via a game when you lost 1-0 to Walsall when they had 2 men.
9 men.
Yeah.
Not 9 men. 9 men. Yeah.
I remember that. Yeah, they told me that story in some detail.
Oh, the minutes must have flown.
No, they were very kind. I very much enjoyed the pod, and I was great being on a Brighton pod. I gritted my teeth after about 20 minutes, but they were very charming people. I enjoyed talking to them very much about football and about Palace Brighton. And you, to be perfectly honest. So
Lordy.
That's the Brighton Rocks pod. Let's give them a bit of love. The Brighton Rocks podcast is very good. So that question comes from Simon Ordeva, or Diva, I don't know. It's a great name. And it's an interesting question. Simon says, my question relates to the intellectual property rights around club nicknames. Do clubs own the rights to their nicknames? For example, Brighton and the Seagulls. I suspect Jonathan Livingston would have something to say about that. That's an esoteric reference for some of the more intelligent people listening, but I don't see how you can't claim intellectual rights to the word Seagulls, can you? I know this was an issue for Liverpool trying to claim the intellectual rights to the word Liverpool, but even as a Palace fan, I don't think we can legitimately say that nobody else can use the word Eagles without bunging us a few quid, can we?
Yeah, I don't think Don Henley would be overchuffed with that either. The answer is it depends.
Okay,
it
really?
depends how unique the phrase is. So therefore, that's why Liverpool Football Club were not able to claim intellectual property rights to things such as Liverpool itself, which did seem a little bit overarching. There have been other things to take place in that fair city where I work. So if Newcastle potentially could go for the Toon, because it would be fairly unique. But clubs have actually got into trouble with things this in the past. I was doing some research, and West Ham had a cease and desist order from selling foam hammers because Timmy Mallet had claimed the rights to that.
Really?
Yeah. So if you've got a smart enough lawyer, they will try and do this. So the name Crystal Palace Football Club, clearly Palace have the rights to that because that is unique. As it goes slightly broader, if you get in first, and you can say that there is a connection and there will be a public perception that the use of this phrase or wording is inextricably linked to the club itself, then you might have a case. But you'd have to get hold of an intellectual property lawyer, and they would act on your behalf. Now, clearly that didn't work for Liverpool, did work for Timmy Mallet.
That's interesting, actually. I presume badges would be different, though, wouldn't they? Because they're more clearly identified with a particular club.
Yes, yeah, and remember we ran the story a few weeks ago about Steve Dale trying to take personal ownership of the Bury crest, and was the Bury AFC crest, or the Phoenix Club. Was that too close to it? So there are issues arising in things of that nature. So I'd always advise people to take care if they are going to use something, to make sure that it hasn't been claimed by somebody else, because you do get squatters in terms of intellectual property rights, in terms of domain names, if you're involved in internet related issues and things of that nature.
Okay, that's interesting. Now, questions at priceoffootball.com is what you want if you need any questions answered about football. And the good news is, if you thought you were excited about the prospect of a pod on Christmas Eve, how do you fancy one on the Monday between Christmas and New Year, and on New Year's Eve as well? Because that's what you're going to get.
Well, you won't be going to any parties, will you?
No, that's true. You won't be going into parties. And also, we are quite firmly, and I don't mind letting the the magic escape here. We're quite firmly recording all three of those on Wednesday, Kieran. We both put our foot down. Or rather, I put my foot down and the Baroness put her foot down on your behalf. So we're taking an actual 10-day break over Christmas, but we will record 3 pods on Wednesday, 2 of which will be questions. So any questions you have about your football club or about the financial plight of football in general, questions at priceoffootball.com. I'm going to mention Swindon Town here because I can't remember whether I mentioned the list of clubs who have done particularly good things, whose fans have done particularly good things. I did promise to mention Swindon because they're doing some very good stuff in their community, and I can't remember if I did so the last time. So if they get a second mention, it doesn't really matter. And Kieran, I won't say Merry Christmas because I can say that on Christmas Eve, but Merry next couple of days. Kieran, I really do hope you enjoy your game today down there in Tier 2. I look forward to the atmosphere coming across on Sky TV.
I'll enjoy it because it's football. Like the guys you were chatting to the other day, I don't expect us to win. We have become very, very morose. But for football fans, it's about being morose and miserable and expecting your club to lose all the time. As soon as you go into a rough patch, the gods are aligned today for Sheffield United's first win of the season. But it's football, and I'm going to a stadium, and I'm so excited.
Yeah, strange that Brighton fans should be morose when the media are constantly telling us that Graham Potter is the second coming and the best young coach that English football's ever seen. But isn't that odd? There you go. But also, they're still telling us that Sheffield United will definitely escape relegation because Chris Wilder's a genius, even though they've only got 1 point after 12 games. There you are. I did like one of the lads, I can't remember, I think it might have been Pete, one of the lads on the Brighton podcast the other night. We were talking about the fact that we all know people who don't want to go back until they're a full stadium and they can go to the pubs. And basically he said, yeah, what they're giving us is the worst part of the experience, the actual football game. So that's
right.
Yeah, we can't do any of the lovely bits before or afterwards, but we have to sit through the ordeal of the 90 minutes. And even at half time, well, there you go. That's, as you say, that's in the nature of football fans. Stay safe, everybody. I'm really, really sorry that Christmas is not going to turn out for a lot of you as well as you hoped. And we are very aware that a 20-minute podcast from us on Christmas Eve will only be of consolation to 1 or 2 of the sadder people listening to it. We will be with you on Christmas Eve. Until then, stay safe and have a lovely few days.
Bye.
The price of football. The price of football.